just looking at the world, there are so many different, unique people. There's different cultures, different languages, different societies, each person in it something extremely special. But why has it gotten to the point where people deny their differences? Well, the truth is, we are different. And nothing is going to change that, but the way we view our differences definitely can. Out of approximately 7 billion people who live on this planet, spread out over 196 different countries, studies have shown that there are approximately 2,000 different races. That means that each one of us is incredibly unique. So what happened in society that made race and differences become a bad thing? What broke in our minds to where that something that is as beautiful and diverse and special as race and ethnicity has been something that's directly related to things such as fear, injustice, abuse, shame, pain, and suffering? What happened to where now we no longer see this person and this person as equals? What does this do to society? How does this affect us? Well, let's look at it through the parameters of this class, which is power and ethics. So the first thing we're going to do is define power. And although there are many definitions that we can use to define power, in this case we're just going to stick with just one, which is power as the ability to influence others to act according to your own will. So let's look at this idea of power through racism. Racism can be seen as the struggle to establish authority over others. So you see where this is already an idea of power in and of itself. So what does this do? This leads to things in our society such as slavery, things as white supremacy. These are just a few examples of what racism does in the balance of power in our everyday society. That makes this balance where power should be, where power is distributed, all of a sudden undermined until eventually it's gone. Now let's do the same kind of analysis for ethics. So as we said before, there are many ways to define these words that we're using, but the definition we're going to use now is moral principles that govern a person or group's behavior. So basically a way to determine right and wrong, just to keep it more simple. So let's look at this through the lens of racism. How does racism affect this? Well, racism in itself affects the idea of ethics in that it's trying to decide what is human and what's not. In other words, dehumanizing other people to establish one or others that are superior and others who are inferior. This leads directly into the changing of standards, so it makes the standards completely transform into what is acceptable treatment of others. In other words, what am I allowed to do? Why is this person different than this person? So you see, the whole idea of ethics, this universal idea of what is right and what is wrong, is constantly going to be undermined by this idea of changing. Eventually, it'll get to the point where ethics is simply rewritten, as it has been many times in our history. So, how are these things related? Why do we look at power and ethics in the same way? Well, power is a kind of a cycle. Power defines ethics, and ethics in turn justifies that power. Racism, although it's seen as kind of its own thing, is just a tool that is used in this cycle. So let's do a quick review of what we've talked about so far. Racism, and we're going to look at it in two ways, can be affected power and can affect ethics. These two things directly define our society, the place that we live in, our world, and as such defines leadership. The way we lead, how we lead. If there's one thing that we've learned in this class, whether it be through our instructors, texts, activities, and more importantly in many cases each other, is that racism is a real thing that will affect society and continue to affect it. But we, as leaders of the future, have the ability to change it.